It's Dr. T, and in this episode, we're answering the question, how do tariffs work? First, let's get into what is a tariff. A tariff is a tax, plain and simple. It is a tax charged by a government and placed on importers of goods that come from other countries. So it may be a blanket tariff on all the goods that come from a country. It may be a targeted tariff where it's on only particular goods that come from a country. But that is money paid to the government. Let's say the United States levies a tariff on steel from another country. The importer of the steel pays the tariff to the US government. Governments do not pay the tariff. Wherever the importer is importing the steel from, that government of that country is not paying the tariff. Importers then take that cost that they've had to bear in paying a tax to the US government and then pass that cost on to the consumer, in this case, us, Americans. What's the logic behind tariffs? Well, it's actually a way to punish people that are perceived as not trading fairly with us. And so it may be that they are doing things like they have their tariffs on our goods, things that we build here. Exports from farms are commodities. Those products may have a tariff on them. They may be limiting the amount of our goods that can come in. Maybe they don't have a blanket tariff on all of them, but they only let so much of it in. It may be that they are not playing fairly in other ways. So, for example, China has a long history of not recognizing our copyright and trademark laws. And so they steal our intellectual property, like films from Hollywood, for example. So tariffs have been used to try to coerce them into changing their policies around trade. But whatever happens in terms of tariffs, the additional costs are a way to try to impose a punishment on the goods of another country to make them less competitive. Because when the cost rises for us here in the US, in a free market, you would say, well, I'm not going to buy this good because it's higher in cost, or I'm going to buy less of it. And so it ultimately is supposed to punish the companies in the countries that have some kind of policy that we view as unfair to our manufacturers or the people that produce things in our country. Do tariffs work? The short answer is no, especially on the scale that we see them right now under the Trump regime. These tariffs on everybody without any real formula that anybody understands. There isn't a sane economist or business person who understands and thinks is a good idea the way that the Trump regime has imposed these tariffs we're experiencing now in the spring of 2025. We don't have to go back very far in our history. We can go back about 100 years to the Smoot-Hawley Act, which deepened the Great Depression, made things worse. It was only the giant amount of spending that we had to do for World War II that actually really pulled us out of the Great Depression. So what are the tariffs doing now that are in place now in 2025? The biggest thing they're doing is causing tremendous uncertainty in our economy, as well as the world economy, and a great deal of stress. And those are two things that businesses do not like. They do not like stress and uncertainty. And so the whole idea of these tariffs is Trump thinks that if he can impose all this pain on other countries, that they will start building things in our country, or that our companies who are building a lot of things overseas will come back to the US and base their manufacturing in the US, because that's the way to get around the tariffs, make their goods cost less to American consumers, and then create jobs for American consumers. But it's trying to bring manufacturing back in the worst possible environment. Again, businesses do not like this kind of uncertainty. And so the policy is working at cross purposes. You're not going to encourage more business and building and manufacturing in an environment where they don't know what to count on. They don't know how to plan long term for that kind of building. What are the current tariffs doing in this moment? First of all, they're destroying the wealth of Americans by cratering the stock market. There are lots of people who have money in 401ks because that's what we're told to do to plan for our retirement. Social Security is not sufficient for most of us to live, and so we need something else, and most of us have put our money in the stock market. The tariffs are also destroying consumer confidence, because if we know that the cost of pretty much everything is going to go up under this widespread, inexplicable tariff regime. It's destroying the confidence. People are worried about losing their jobs, are worried they aren't going to have money to spend, and so they're going to cut back, which means it will create a recession. By definition, if people are spending less, we will have less money moving, fewer jobs, more unemployment. That's how it works. So what should we be doing instead? Well, as I said, tariffs can work in a targeted way, but really what you want to do is not beat people over the head with a stick, but incentivize them to come work. So there can be targeted tax incentives to bring jobs back in the United States. Or conversely, we could tax people who continue to move jobs overseas. We have a history in this country of actually rewarding people in our tax structure for offshoring these jobs. And we could get rid of those pieces of our tax law so that it would be harder for people or less advantageous financially for people to move jobs overseas. We may also need to think about government just spending and investing directly in manufacturing for things we really need. So part of the argument is this is a national security issue. So things like we know in the pandemic, we had a hard time getting personal protective equipment because it was all made overseas. So one of the things government does well is invest in the things that we need here. And so the government could invest in manufacturing, if it's computer chips, if it's preparation for another pandemic, whatever it is, the federal government could take on that role, and that would create jobs. We also could take some of the money that we are burning up in the stock market right now, that value, and invest it in helping people who have lost manufacturing jobs to retrain for something else, to be educated to do another kind of work. All of those things are possible. So what are we likely to get from this current course? Right now, it's an economic disaster that we are facing in real time. We're cratering our economy and the economies around the world. You're going to see a loss of wealth for people in their 401ks, as we mentioned. So people are going to have to work longer. They're not going to be able to step out of the job market. People who have already are going to be in real serious trouble, and they're going to need more social support at a time when Republicans are cutting it right now. As I record this, they're trying to do the budget in April of 2025, and they're trying to cut nearly $1 trillion from social spending programs to pay for a tax cut for billionaires. We're also going to get higher unemployment. The other thing that everyone is going to notice is that everything is going to cost more. Some things could double and triple in price. And that is not what anybody voted for. That's not what any family needs at this moment. So we're going to have increased poverty over the short to medium term, maybe even the long term if these tariffs stay in place. Because even if somehow these tariffs manage to bring some manufacturing back, it's going to take a long time to do that. It's going to take a couple of years. And a lot of families do not have that kind of runway. They cannot sustain that kind of economic pain.